Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. My name is Corey Bennett, and I am 36 years old. 3 weeks before my wedding, I sat across from my fiancée, Sabrina Ellis, in a quiet corner of a coffee shop in downtown Baltimore. The brick walls held old photographs of the harbor. The air smelled like cinnamon and dark roast, and everything felt ordinary in that slow, Sunday sort of way. She fidgeted with her engagement ring, white gold, oval cut, paid for in cash because I had wanted every piece of our life to feel solid. And then she told me she was canceling the wedding. She did not laugh. She did not cry. She said it with a careful calm that made me feel like I had fallen through a trapdoor. I blinked and asked the only question that made sense. What happened? She did not stall for time. She did not pretend not to hear. She said, "I am in love with Miles." And for a few seconds a room felt like it tilted, as if the floor had tried to shrug me off its shoulders. Miles Thornton was our wedding planner. He worked for Prestige Event Planning, an upscale firm with glossy brochures and a roster of venues that looked like they belonged in magazines. He had come highly recommended by one of Sabrina's friends, and when we first met him 8 months ago, he dressed like a commercial for success and ease. He knew every caterer in the city, had vendors wrapped around his finger, and carried himself with that practiced confidence people pay a premium to borrow on their big days. Looking back, the signs were there. Sabrina wanted private, vision meetings, with him without me. She texted late at night about last-minute centerpiece emergencies that never seemed to end. Her face changed when Miles called. It softened, lit from the inside with something I did not know how to name then. I had chosen not to see it, because I had chosen to trust her. We had been together for 4 years and engaged for the last 14 months. Trust is a habit you do not know you are building until you are asked to spend it without warning. At the table, I asked how long. Sabrina stared down at the small scratch in the wood between us and said, 2 months. I did a slow count of 5 in my head and said, "So while I was choosing ties with my brother and tasting cake samples, you were falling for our wedding planner." She closed her eyes for a second and opened them with a new kind of resolve. It was not supposed to happen. It just did. That, I would later learn, was the refrain people use when they're trying to make a map that removes their responsibility for the journey. I let the silence sit, even though my lungs felt tight. After 30 heartbeats, I counted because it was either count or break. I said the only words I could manage. "I understand." She looked genuinely surprised, as if she had expected shouting or a scene. "You do?" she asked. "I understand," I repeated. "These things happen. I will handle canceling everything." Relief loosened her shoulders. "Thank you," she said. "I was worried you would make it ugly. I want us to be friends." I nodded. "Sure, Sabrina. Whatever you need." We did the awkward dance of politeness, talked about dividing furniture, and then she stood, pressed her palm flat on the table like she needed reassurance it was steady, and walked out. I stared at the space she had just left, took a long breath, and pulled out my phone. First call, Jordan Price, my friend from college who had become a contract attorney with a brain that worked like a supercomputer and the humor of a man who had seen too many depositions. "Jordan," I said when he picked up, "I need you on standby. I may be walking into contract quicksand." He said, "Do not say anything else until I tell you to, and forward me every document you signed with anyone whose job involves linen napkins." I laughed once, one of those laughs that taste like salt. "Will do." Second call, Prestige Event Planning. I asked for the owner and was put on a brief hold. A warm, careful voice came on the line. "This is Langston Pierce." He was the owner and founder, the man whose name showed up on every email template with a signature that looked like it had been designed. I kept my voice steady even though my heartbeat was outpacing the second hand of the clock above the espresso machine. "Mr. Pierce, my name is Corey Bennett, and I need to inform you of a serious ethics issue concerning your employee, Miles Thornton." He did not fill the pause with words. He let the silence do the work. When he spoke, the warm shape of his voice had sharpened. "Tell me exactly what has happened." I told him what Sabrina had confessed, an affair for 2 months with Miles while he was overseeing our wedding. I said I had text messages and emails and, if necessary, could provide proof of her admission. There was a quiet stretch that felt like a courtroom where no one moves until the judge decides they are allowed. "Mr. Bennett," he said finally, I am deeply sorry. This is unacceptable. Our policies are not suggestions. We will investigate immediately. I told him I was not calling to demand a refund, although we had paid $12,000 for full-service coordination. I said I was calling because I thought he should know what kind of person was representing his company. I meant it. That was the calm truth. The other truth, my private one, was that I wanted consequences to attach themselves to the people who had turned my life into a cleanup operation. If gravity exists for the rest of us, it ought to exist for them, too. By the next morning, Mr. Pierce called me back. His tone was professional and controlled, but I could hear a displeasure that had nothing performative about it. Mr. Bennett, he said, we have terminated Mr. Thornton effective immediately. Our review confirms that he used company time and resources for personal meetings and communications with your fiancée. We will refund your entire payment. Additionally, to avoid legal action, we are prepared to offer a settlement. Would $18,000 be acceptable? I did the math. $12,000 return plus $6,000 more to settle. That is very generous, I said. He replied, it is damage control. There will be a non-disclosure agreement regarding our company's internal handling. I assume that is clear. Of course, I said, knowing exactly where the boundary lines of that agreement would stop. The non-disclosure agreement covered my interactions with Prestige Event Planning, but it did not reach into my personal life or my right to describe what Sabrina had told me. The distinction matters. People who play with the edges of rules trust that others will not understand where the lines are. I do not love lines, but I respect them. That evening, I began canceling the wedding. I called the venue, a historic brownstone event space in Philadelphia that had once hosted old money galas and now hosted weddings for people like us who saved and planned and wanted one unforgettable night. I told the manager the truth. He had the tired compassion of a man who has seen too many couples split in the doorway to the great ballroom. He returned half our deposit. The caterer kept their deposit, $2,000. But they wished me well in a voice that made me feel like maybe they meant it. The photographer, an old classmate of mine who had switched majors from economics to art and never looked back, refunded everything and signed off her email with, I am sorry, Corey. You deserve better. I did one petty thing. I posted on my social media. Wedding is off. Sabrina fell in love with someone else. These things happen. If anyone needs a prepaid disc jockey for December 15th, I have one. I did not mention Miles by name. I did not have to. Sabrina's friends knew exactly who the wedding planner was because they had been vocal about how skilled and charming he was. Word travels along the channels people build when they want to be seen together. Wednesday night, Sabrina called me. She was not restrained. Corey, what did you do? Miles got fired. I said, I did not do anything but inform his employer that he was in a relationship with a client. She swallowed that and let fury grow in its place. You vindictive man. You said you understood. I let the silence stretch for a count of 4 and then said, I understand that he violated professional ethics and his employment contract. Those are natural consequences. She said, he is going to lose everything. His apartment and car are tied to his job. I said, then he should have thought that through. Thursday morning at 7, pounding at my door woke me up. Through the doorbell camera, I saw Sabrina and her older sister, Lauren, on my porch in coats thrown over pajamas. I spoke through the speaker. Good morning. Lauren's voice was already raised. You need to call that company and fix this. Tell them you were mistaken. I opened the door, but left the chain on. No, I said. You destroyed Miles's career because you were jealous, Lauren snapped. I reported an ethics violation. The company made a decision, I replied. Sabrina's eyes were glassy. Corey, please. Miles is talking about suing you for defamation. I laughed before I could stop myself. For what? Telling the truth? I have your confession, text between you and Miles, and a recording of our coffee shop conversation. She stared at me like I had slapped her. You recorded me? I live in a one-party consent state, I said. It is legal. Lauren shifted strategies. What about the deposits, the wedding costs? She asked. Sabrina says you are keeping everything. I shook my head. I am canceling everything and taking the financial hit. Whatever I can get refunded comes back to me because I paid for it. I am not financing a wedding for Sabrina and Miles. Lauren shot. That is financial abuse. I said, it is not. It is the opposite. It is me unplugging my wallet from a situation I did not create. They left with more accusations hanging in the air like damp clothes. And for the first time since the coffee shop, I felt the early rumble of anger. Not the kind that sends you breaking things, but the righteous kind that reminds you indignation exists for a reason. Friday was quiet. So quiet the silence made its own sound. Saturday morning at 3:07, my door took a beating like it owed someone money. I looked at the camera and saw Sabrina and Miles. I spoke through the speaker. "Go away or I am calling the police." Miles leaned forward into the camera frame, face rough and unshaven, the polished gloss completely stripped. "Open this door. We need to talk man to man." I said, "We have nothing to discuss. Leave." He said, "You cost me everything. My job, my reputation." I said, "You cost yourself everything when you slept with a client." Sabrina's voice entered like a soft echo. "Corey, please just hear us out. Miles has a proposition." Against my better judgment, I unlatched the door but kept the chain secured. Miles pulled out his phone and scrolled with a jerkiness that made me think he had rehearsed this move in a mirror and practiced the lines in his head. "I have emails," he said. "Emails where you talked to me about Sabrina, private things, intimate things you shared about your relationship challenges. You do not want those public." I looked at him, then at Sabrina, who looked small and exhausted. "Are you trying to blackmail me?" I asked. He said, "I'm trying to make a deal. You call Langston Pierce, say it was a misunderstanding, tell him you overreacted, and these emails stay private." I stared at him for 3 slow seconds that felt like 10. "So your plan is to threaten to violate client confidentiality to blackmail me into perjuring myself to your former employer," I said. Sabrina reached for his arm. "Miles, please do not." He shook her off. "Do not, Sabrina. This is your fault too," he snapped, and in that moment something heavy fell from her face. The romantic story she had been telling herself about the two of them cracked cleanly down the middle. I pulled out my phone and held it up so the camera caught our faces and voices clear. "I am recording this," I said. "Would you like to continue?" He went pale. "You cannot record." I cut him off. "One-party consent," I said. "And I consent." I pointed to the camera above the door. "Also that. Get off my property before I call the police." Sabrina started to cry, not theatrically, not begging, but as if the hope she had clutched was slipping out of her hands one finger at a time. "Corey, please do not call the police," she said. "Miles has already lost so much." I said, "Then he should stop trying to commit crimes." They backed down the steps, and just before Miles turned, he punched the wooden frame beside the door, leaving a splintered bruise in the paint. The doorbell camera caught it. I saved the clip in a folder I named, for my own sanity, "Receipts." Sunday afternoon, Jordan called me. "Did you make a wedding planner angry?" he asked with the cheerful tone he reserved for fights he knows he can win. "Why?" I asked. "Because I just got a ridiculous email full of threats about exposing you as an abusive partner who sabotaged true love," he said, and he chuckled like he was at a comedy set. By the end of the day, I learned Miles had sent emails to my employer, my parents, and several friends. He had used his professional email account, the one that still bore the Prestige event planning signature, and attached screenshots of text exchanges where I had vented normal relationship frustrations and anxiety about the wedding. He framed them like evidence of control and cruelty. He forgot 2 things. Context exists, and he left his own flirtatious replies to Sabrina visible. Jordan said, "This man does not understand. He just handed us everything we need to knock him flat. You cannot violate client confidentiality and then pretend you were acting nobly." I asked, "How much would it cost to shut this down properly?" He said, "For this, I will take payment in the form of a very good bottle of scotch. I am in this for the entertainment value." Monday morning, he drafted and sent a cease and desist to both Miles and Sabrina. It laid out the attempted blackmail with the doorbell footage, the violation of client confidentiality, the defamation in emails sent to my professional and personal circles, and promised civil and criminal action if either of them contacted me or anyone in my orbit again. Jordan also copied Mr. Pierce at Prestige Event Planning. An hour later, my phone rang with Mr. Pierce's name. "Mr. Bennett," he said, calm but unmistakably displeased, "I have just seen the letter. We are pursuing our own legal action. Mr. Thornton signed an agreement that prohibits the use of client information for any purpose beyond company business for 2 years after termination. The penalty for violation is $50,000. Would you be willing to cooperate with our counsel? I said, absolutely. He said, I apologize again for what you have endured. We do not abide this. The next day, Harold Ellis, Sabrina's father, called me. Harold is a quiet man with a sturdy presence, the kind of man who was always early to pick us up from the airport because he believed being late showed a lack of care. Corey, he said, what is going on? Sabrina is at our house, saying there are lawsuits and ruined lives. I told him the truth, plain and without embellishment. The affair, the confession, the attempted blackmail, the emails, the cease and desist, the company's separate action. I could hear him breathe. Good God, he said after a long pause. She left you for the wedding planner, and he tried to blackmail you. That is the short version, I said. He cleared his throat. We raised her better than this. I said, it is not your fault. He said, the hell it is not. Look, what can I do? I said, just keep them away from me. He said, done. And Corey. He stopped, like he was choosing a landing spot. We gave Sabrina $15,000 to contribute to the wedding. That was for both of you. I want you to have it. I pushed back. Harold, I cannot take that. He said, consider an apology from our family. I will handle Sabrina. The steadiness of his voice carried a kind of sorrow that made me sit down on the edge of my bed, even though I had been standing in the kitchen when the call began. He is a man who keeps his promises. When he says he will handle something, he means it. Wednesday morning I woke to 52 text messages from an unknown number. Sabrina had gotten a burner phone. The messages came in short bursts. Please talk to me. Miles is falling apart. He might lose his professional license. This is all my fault. I made a mistake. Can we meet? If you drop the charges, I will leave him. That last message crystallized something I had been feeling but had not articulated. This had never been about love in the deep, durable sense. It had been about proximity to excitement and flattering attention. When the heat cooled, what was left did not look like a life. I screenshotted every message and sent them to Jordan. The following night, the familiar pounding returned at 3 in the morning. This time, Sabrina stood alone on my porch in a coat thrown over a black dress that looked wrinkled, as if she had fallen asleep in it. Her face was a map of exhaustion and regret. I spoke through the speaker. You are violating the cease and desist. I am calling the police. She looked into the camera and said, I do not care. Call them. I need to say something. I stood at the door and weighed my mercy against my boundaries, then set a timer in my head. You have 2 minutes, I said. After that, I am calling. She drew in a breath that sounded like a hurt and said, Miles is not who I thought he was. He is angry all the time now. He blames me for everything. He says I ruined his life by falling for him. I said, you both ruined your own lives. She said, I know I messed up. Her shoulders shook. But what we had is gone, I said. You ended it. I want to come home, she said, and her voice went very small. This is not your home, I said. It never was. Your name is not on the lease. She said, for years, Corey. Does that mean nothing? It meant everything, I told her. Past tense. The police arrived. Sabrina went quietly. I declined to press charges because I did not want that weight. The next morning, Jordan filed for a restraining order, and a judge signed it without commentary beyond. Keep your distance. It is astonishing how quickly paper can redraw the space around a person's life. 3 weeks after the coffee shop confession, my life looked different. Miles was being sued by Prestige Event Planning for $50,000 and had lost his professional certification for ethics violations after the board reviewed the evidence. The industry's informal network, curated by people like Mr. Pierce with long memories and careful spreadsheets, made sure he would not be welcomed by reputable vendors anytime soon. Last I heard, he moved back in with his parents in Newark and started working at a restaurant to pay his bills while he tried to figure out his next story. Sabrina moved back into her parents' house in Prince George's County. Harold cut off her financial support with a quiet finality that meant more than anger ever could. She started working retail again in a mall outside Silver Spring, recalibrating her hours to match a life that no longer been around wedding plans and brunches with people who called the affair a whirlwind in the first week and then called it an embarrassment when the lawsuits began. She tried to launch a new social media page about surviving a relationship with a narcissist, but the comments did not give her the sympathy she wanted. She deleted the account within 2 days. Prestige Event Planning sent me a final check for $22,000 in total. The extra $4,000 was, I assumed, a buffer to ensure my silence regarding their internal processes and to put enough distance between this mess and their brand. Mr. Pierce also told me, with professional courtesy and a hard edge, that Miles had been blacklisted by every vendor that counted. I did not cheer. I did not gloat. I filed the check and the email in a folder labeled closure. As for me, I was not thriving. I was not destroyed. I booked 3 therapy sessions to keep from narrating the entire experience to myself in a way that made me the villain or the fool. The therapist's office in Washington, D.C. had soft light and a rug with an abstract pattern that looked like it had been painted by someone in a hurry. I talked about trust and boundaries, about the difference between grace and enabling, about the shock of hearing a life you build described in the past tense by someone you loved. She said things that made immediate sense, and said some things that needed a week to settle into place. I took a solo trip to Las Vegas with a portion of the refund money and stayed in a hotel with glass elevators that looked over the lights while they pulsed and hustled. I lost $500 at a blackjack table, tipped the dealer, and went to bed before midnight with the television on mute and the curtains open. The next morning, I rented a car and drove out to the Red Rock Canyon, where the desert held firm without asking for approval. Back at the hotel, I swam slow laps while a group of friends on a bachelor trip cheered and clapped at nothing in particular. I had fun. It was not the kind of fun you brag about. It was the kind you let soak into your bones until you remember what peace feels like when no one is pulling at your sleeve. When I returned home, my apartment felt emptier in the best possible way. I boxed up the leftover favors we had ordered with our initials and gave them to a neighbor's daughter for craft projects. I took the tuxedo back and got most of my deposit since the tailor was kind. I stood in the small hallway one evening with the lights off and realized I could breathe differently now, as if the air had been filtered. It felt like fumigation, like someone had found the source of a smell and cleaned it away. My brother, Nate, came over with takeout and a 6-pack. He grinned like big brothers do when they need to break tension without disrespecting it. "You know what happened?" he said, cracking open a bottle. "She left you for the help and thought you would just take it. Instead, they both learned what gravity feels like." I laughed harder than I had in weeks. "That is a cruel joke," I said. He shrugged. "Cruel, yes. Untrue, no." There was one more visit, 6 weeks after the coffee shop. The knock was polite this time, the kind of knock that assumes you might be sleeping and does not want to wake you, but also needs to be heard. On my porch stood a woman I recognized from the faint way you recognize a name in a story you do not belong to. "Are you Corey?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I am Naomi Brooks," she said. "I am Miles's ex-girlfriend." She gave the words room to land between us. "Ex," I said. She nodded. "I wanted to thank you." She explained in clear, steady sentences that Miles had been gaslighting her for months. He would come home late with explanations that sounded like they had been polished by someone with experience in soft lies, vendor crises, late tastings, assistant mix-ups. He kept his phone face down and his passcode changed 3 times in 2 months. She suspected something. He convinced her she was paranoid and controlling. When he got fired and the truth came out, every piece clicked together like a puzzle she had stared at for days without seeing the pattern. "He had been cheating on me with your fiancé while planning your wedding," she said with a quiet marvel, as if even saying it made it sound like a bad plot. We grabbed coffee at the same Baltimore shop where Sabrina had ended my engagement. The world loves a circle. Naomi and I compared notes like 2 auditors flipping through an account book. Her timelines and mine overlapped with precision. Nights he told her he was with a vendor, he was with Sabrina. Times Sabrina told me she was at her sister's, she was with Miles. Naomi's eyes were tired but sharp. "They deserve each other," she said at the end. 2 cheaters who threw away good relationships for a thrill and then learned that thrills do not take out the trash. People kept asking whether I kept the ring. I did. I sold it for $8,000. It was a loss, sure, but the moment I handed it over and watched the jeweler examine it with his loupe, I felt something unclench. If objects can hold ghosts, I needed that ghost to live somewhere else. It helped that the jeweler did not ask questions beyond the kind of professional questions that help establish value. He polished it, weighed it, and slid a check across the counter with a sympathetic nod and no other commentary. I did not start dating. I was still processing. I went to work, hit the gym, return calls I had ignored while my life was a courtroom drama, and watched a lot of basketball with Nate and our friend Marcus, who, like everyone in our circle, had something to say about Miles that was completely unsuited for polite publication. Harold checked on me once a week, and eventually we settled into a routine. One beer, a quiet bar near his office in D.C., two men talking about baseball and the weather until one of us said a sentence that belonged to heavier subjects, and then we let that sentence be the only one of its kind for the night. It is possible to be kind after pain. He is the proof. There is an accounting people expect you to do, and it goes like this. Did you win? Did they lose? Did you get back more than you put in? It is not a math problem, but people love numbers because numbers make them feel like the universe is fair. If you really want to count, here it is. From Prestige Event Planning, $22,000 in total. From Harold, $15,000. From The Ring, $8,000. From various refunds, a surprising amount. If we're doing the ledger, then yes, I came out ahead financially. But that is not the point. The point is that I stopped being their safety net. Sometimes the best revenge is not elaborate. Sometimes it is simply letting people face the natural consequences of their choices while you step out of the role they assigned you without your consent. Sabrina wanted Miles enough to throw away 4 years. Now she has him, or at least the version of him that remains when the career was peeled away to reveal a man who blames, threatens, and forgets where the line between ethical and criminal sits. Miles wanted to sleep with a client enough to risk his work and reputation. Now he has exactly what he earned. Nothing. I did not want to become a person who tells his story like a warning label. I wanted to become a person who learned the lesson and put the book back on the shelf. There is a difference between wisdom and fixation. Therapy helped. So did distance. So did deciding that the story needed an ending and, once ended, would not be reopened for edits by people who wanted to recast themselves in better lighting. If you want the fuller recounting of how things happened from those first weeks, here are the details I have not yet included, but that belong to the record of what it felt like to live through it. When I called Mr. Pierce the first time, I stood in the coffee shop bathroom for privacy and stared at my face in the mirror while I said, "Your employee has been sleeping with my fiancée." My expression did not match the sentence. It looked like a person ordering lunch. Shock has a way of flattening the voice. After I hung up, I splashed water on my neck and kept my hands under the dryer for 30 seconds longer than necessary, because the white noise was the only sound I could tolerate. When I spoke to Sabrina on the phone Wednesday night, and she called me vindictive, I walked to my window and looked out at the streetlights turning the sidewalk amber. A couple walked past, their hands linked loosely, shoulders almost touching but not quite. I did not project anything onto them. I did not assume they were in love. I simply thought, I hope one of you is kind to the other when it matters. Then I set my phone down and let the quiet sit beside me like a friend who knows not to offer advice. The morning Sabrina and Lauren showed up, I made coffee while they banged and yelled. I do not say that it sounds superior, just to say that when you keep your hands busy with something ordinary, your mind has less room to fall apart. I poured 3 cups and put milk and sugar on the counter because kindness costs nothing and I wanted to keep my own reflection clean. When I opened the door, I did not offer the cups. I kept my voice level. When Lauren accused me of jealousy, I remembered the way she had once complimented my patience during a Thanksgiving cooking disaster. The human mind is a jukebox. You do not always get to choose which song plays when a coin is dropped. The night Miles pounded on my door. The air smelled like the rain that had not yet fallen. I could see the worried eyes of my neighbor's cat through their sidelight window. When he pulled out his phone to threaten me, my first thought, ridiculous and true, was that he needed to charge it. The screen brightness was low, the battery icon a sliver of red. It felt like a metaphor I did not need to force. Everything about him was running on a last charge. When Jordan called about the emails, he read out one line with theatrical flair. Corey is a manipulative man who could not stand to see Sabrina happy. Then he paused and deadpanned. He wrote this from an email address that ends with his employer's domain and includes the company's mission statement in the signature. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. Then I stopped laughing and felt a rush of heat. Rage is not useless. It tells you the boundaries of what you will never accept again. The cease and desist letter Jordan drafted was a work of art, spare, precise, full of the kind of sentences that make you sit up straighter. He used phrases like tortious interference and per se defamatory and We will seek injunctive relief, and then anchored each threats with dates, times, and attachments. He made a narrative out of facts. That is a kind of magic I respect. When Mr. Pierce called to talk about the 2-year confidentiality clause and the $50,000 penalty, he sounded like a man who had built his business with care and was not going to let one employee's ego redefine the company's character. He did not brag about how fast he moved. He simply said, "This is not who we are," and then proved it. There are people who apologize with words and people who apologize with actions. I prefer the second kind. The afternoon Harold called. I sat at my dining table where Sabrina and I had once planned seating charts. I could see the street through the window and the way the wind made the thin branches tap against the glass like someone impatient. When he said he wanted me to have the wedding money, my instinct was to return it immediately. Pride is not always a friend, but I listened. Sometimes you honor a person by letting them do what they believe is right. I said, "Thank you," and I meant it. He said, "I will handle Sabrina," and the way he said handle made me feel 10 years old and safe. The morning I got the 52 texts from the burner phone, I set the device on the kitchen counter and watched the messages stack. I read them all once, then again, then a third time, as if repetition would turn them into something they were not. I did not reply. Jordan later said, "That last one, 'I will leave him if you drop the charges,' is the kind of sentence that answers its own question." He was right. It named the bargain clearly. Love should not be barter. The night Sabrina came alone at 3 in the morning, I stood behind the door with my hand on the lock and listened to the small tremor in her voice. Compassion and self-respect had to shake hands. I set a limit and stuck to it. After the police left and the street went quiet, I sat on the floor with my back against the door as if I were holding it closed against the past. It was dramatic and unnecessary and exactly what I needed for 3 long minutes. In therapy, I told the story 3 ways. Once like the hero, once like the fool, once like someone who had simply lived through a bad thing and now needed a new chapter. The therapist said, "When you tell it like you are the hero, you ignore your fear. When you tell it like you are the fool, you ignore your strength. Tell it like you're a person." I left her office and walked a few blocks in cold air and thought, be a person then. In Las Vegas, at a bar that overlooked a row of roulette tables, a retired teacher from Phoenix sat beside me and told me about her first love and the way it ended at a bus stop. "I thought I would die," she said, and then she laughed at the memory, not cruelly but kindly. Turns out I did not die. Turns out I had a good life anyway. We raised our glasses to the dull miracle of endurance without making it sacred. Not every survival requires a ceremony. Some just require time. Back home, I replaced 3 light bulbs I had been ignoring for months. I fixed the wobbly leg on the dining chair Sabrina always complained about. I organized a junk drawer. People laugh at that sort of detail, but you cannot overstate the satisfaction of making small things right when big things refuse to be fixed quickly. I made a pot of gumbo that tasted better the next day. I slept through the night and woke up at a reasonable hour because nobody was calling me to accuse me of criminal jealousy. My mother visited and put her hand on my cheek the way she did when I was a kid. "You will be fine," she said, because mothers say that even when their voices shake. "I am fine," I said, and for once I did not say it to reassure her. I said it because it was finally true for a whole hour at a time, then for a whole day, then for a week. Fine is not fireworks. It is a steady light you can read by. If you need one more image from the unraveling, here it is. The last time Sabrina and I saw each other in person was at the courthouse when the restraining order was finalized. She wore a simple dress and a gray sweater. I wore a navy jacket and a tie I had considered wearing at the wedding. We did not speak. There is a silence that feels like respect and a silence that feels like surrender. This one felt like a boundary drawn clean. We both walked away without looking back, which is a small grace if you choose to see it that way. Naomi and I stayed in touch for a little while. Not as comrades, not as potential partners, but as 2 people who had seen the same storm from different windows and could confirm to each other that it had, in fact, rained. She told me she started taking a pottery class in Newark on Wednesday nights. I told her I picked up running again. "It is not who I am," I said, "but it helps me sleep." She said, "Same for pottery. I hate my first bowl. I love the second one. I'm not sure I will keep any of them." We laughed. Not everything has to become a new identity. The thing about natural consequences is that they do not always arrive on schedule, and they are rarely as dramatic as the movies promise. Sometimes they are a cascade of small losses. The email you should not have sent, the meeting you no longer get invited to, the uncomfortable conversation with your parents, the car you have to return, the apartment you have to leave, the quiet in the kitchen when you realize you are not, in fact, the main character in anyone's better story. Miles learned that. Sabrina learned that. I learned it in a more generous form. Sometimes the natural consequence of refusing to be someone's safety net is that you get your own life back. On a Saturday in early spring, I stood on my porch and looked at the street alive with small errands. A neighbor walking a dog, a kid kicking a soccer ball between two trash cans, a couple arguing gently about whether to stop for brunch or go home and cook. The city had not changed because my life had been. That is how it should be. The universe did not owe me spectacle. It owed me exactly what it gives everyone who is paying attention. Time, air, light, the chance to tell a better story next time. There is a temptation to end with advice. People love advice because it feels like armor you can put on without having to say why you need it. I will not do that. I will say only this. Better to find out before the vows than after. Better to see a person clearly and change your plans than to keep your plans and blind yourself on purpose. The day Sabrina told me she was in love with Miles, I thought the universe was cruel. Weeks later, I think the universe was practical. If you're measuring in clean lines, then yes, I came out ahead financially, and yes, they came out behind. But that misses the point. What I got back was not a sum. It was a steadiness. It was the quiet in the apartment at night that felt like rest rather than abandonment. It was the easy laughter with my brother when we watched a game and yelled at the television like it could hear us. It was Harold's handshake at the end of a beer. It was the way my own breath sounded when I woke up and did not feel startled. The final accounting is this. Sabrina wanted Miles enough to gamble everything, and now she has the version of him that remains when the job and polish are gone. Miles wanted Sabrina enough to ignore his contract, his ethics, his own common sense, and now he is scraping his way through shifts and answering questions about why the resume has a hole in it he cannot explain without telling the truth. Naomi is fine. She is making bowls. Mr. Pierce runs his company the same way he did before, carefully, with rules that mean something. Jordan is waiting for that bottle of scotch. Nate is still talking trash. Harold still calls. As for me, I feel like a man who stepped off a train that was going in the wrong direction before it reached the last stop. I am not yet where I am going. I am not where I was. That is enough. I do not regret what I did. They made choices. I made sure there were consequences, not because I am vindictive, but because I am done pretending that gravity is optional. The chapter is over. The next one has already started, even if it has not announced itself with fanfare. I can hear it in the ordinary sounds of a day that belongs to me. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.